Now, let's say that I didn't quite know how to do this. Well, here we come into the AI part of it again. It's really handy to have our AI helper help us with this kind of thing. So let's take a look at our AI helper here. I've got ChatGPT open. Again, this is the Plus version that I paid for. And I go ahead and I'm going to ask the AI to help me with this. So here's the question I used. I want to make a hyperlink that a user in my Google Sheet can click and jump to a form. And I want the form to be pre-filled values based on the current sheet. So even my English is a little bit wrong there. Still, the AI can guess what I mean. And it goes ahead and gives me some step-by-step direction. So the AI suggests that we go ahead and create the form first, and then we click the menu. And in the menu, you're going to get a pre-filled link. And from that pre-filled link, we can go ahead and fill in some of the information. And right here is what we get. And then we can use that kind of link. So here's another example. It says maybe you can go ahead and inside your sheet then add that link. And then you can go ahead and put in your values that may be dependent on different values inside your sheet, just like this here, which is what we're going to do. And here it explains a little bit about what that is. Entry dot number and entry dot some number. How does that work? And how is that related to the ID of the question inside the form? And then here it specifically helps me with my example because I already told the AI what I was doing. I showed it some of my sheet formulas and cells, and it went ahead and did that for me. So you can see here that the AI can really help you to get these things done. And of course, it's not really helping you from zero. You already have to kind of design your form. You have to know what questions you're going to ask. You have to know what you want out of your class. Otherwise, you're not going to get much out of it. But if you already know what you want, and you just need to understand specifics of how to do something, the AI is super helpful. So let's go ahead and follow what the AI just suggested to us. That is, we go ahead and make our form, which we've done. So our form is all done. We don't need to change the form. But instead, what we do next is we go up to the three dots, the menu, and then we look here to get a special link. That's called the Get Pre-Filled Link. Zoom in, do it again, and here it is, Get Pre-Filled Link. So when I click Get Pre-Filled Link, you can see here that the Google form will tell me pre-filled response, then click link. So what it's saying is, here's the form. Now what I need to do is I need to go ahead and put some information in. And then when I'm done putting information in, I click this button, Get Link. Then I'll get the link with the pre-filled information. Now here's the way I like to do it because it is a little bit hard to follow once you get the link. It's a little bit hard to follow the code. Now this first one here, this is not doable, right? This was not a question, but here's where our questions begin. So we're going to go ahead and fill it in. Email cannot be filled in because you need to use your registration for Google. Join a group. So here I'm going to say AAA. Join a group. And then Chinese name, I'm going to say BBB. Now you can see must be a number is not going to allow me because I already set that inside the form that it must be a number. So I'll just go ahead and change that to a number then. 111. And Chinese name BBB. And English name CCC. And student number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll just make this 444. Okay. So the idea is I want to be able to quickly see what are the codes that match the questions, because the questions are not going to come up in the link. It's going to be hard to see. Now I'm going to go ahead and press Get Link. Okay, so that's good. Now I'm going to come over to our other page here. Clyde, stop it. We need to back up a little bit. We go ahead and click Get Link, and we're going to get a pop-up here, and we're going to press Copy Link. And now we've got the link copied to our clipboard. And here I pasted the link that was copied right here. You can see the whole link. It's a little bit complicated, right? Well, let's take a look at this thing that's a little bit too complicated to follow. And let's go ahead and parse it a little bit, take a look at it a little bit. So what we have here is the HTTPS or the URL, and that goes all the way down to here. And then you can see we've got this forms bit here and a little bit of Google's specification. But then here we're getting something that's very important that we're going to use a lot in this class. And that's this long number with letters in it. And this long thing here is actually the ID, the identification number for the form. Now these IDs can be used for forms and for documents, other Google documents. They all have an ID. And so we don't need to use their whole URL address. Rather, we use just this piece here will help us to find the document we're looking for. And then what do we have after that little bit? We have this view form, because we know it's a form. That's going to tell us a form. And then the question mark is, inside that form, what are some of the data that's going to be collected? And remember, look right here. We've got 111. Remember, we did that. And over here, we've got BBB. And over here, we have CCC. And over here, we have 444. Now, why do we use 1? Because in the form, I required it to be a number. It had to be a number, so I had to put in a number, so I just did 1. And over here, it had to be a letter. It had to be some words. So I went ahead and used B. So basically, this is the first one, and this is the second field. This is the first question, the second question, and this is the third question, and this is the fourth question. So if we go back to our form, we can see that's exactly the way it's laid out. We have our email, which doesn't count as 1 because that's going to be filled in because we're logged into Google. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 questions. And we can see over here that we've got 4 questions also. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and insert values into these. So for example, if I just use this link, if I just copied this whole link and I went to the page, it would go ahead and put in 111, BBB, CCC, and 444 for me automatically. Let's go ahead and try that. So let's close this and let's come to an empty page, and I'm going to paste in the link value. And then I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And you see, we come to the form. Now, I began the form, so it's asking me if I want to continue. So I'm going to say continue, go ahead. And then if we scroll down, we can see that it has these parts filled out. Now, if I change my browser, let me go ahead and try a different browser here. Let me try Edge. A totally different browser, totally empty. And I go ahead and paste this in. I'm going to come and I'm going to use, again, it's asking me if I want to continue because it knows I was working on it. What if I use a previous draft? Okay, same thing. It's automatically filling that out for me. So we've got the 111, the BBB, the CCC, and the 444 in there. Okay, so if I was already working on it, it helps me to fill it in. If I wasn't working on it, it helps me to fill it in. If I've never been here before, it'll fill it in for me automatically. So that's the pre-filled feature of a form. It's very powerful. So what are we going to do then to help us in our specific case? Because obviously we don't want to have 111, BBB, CCC, and 444, do we? That's not what we want. We actually want something that's meaningful. So how can we make something meaningful? Well, what we can do is we can take something like, for example, let me see, the group number is what we want. So we come back to the form. Which question was asking about the group number? It's the number 1 question. Here we wrote 111. So if we come over to our pre-filled URL line, we can see that 111 is here. And so what we can say is that this 111, actually I don't want this 111 to be 111. I want it to be a value. What value do I want it to be? Well, if we come over to our sheet over here, we can see that the group you're choosing is in the C column. And so in this case, it would be C2. If I clicked the join group here, which I cannot click now, but let's just pretend I could. So if I click that one, it would be C2. So I can come over to this line and I want to make this C2. But when I make it C2, I want to make this a $sign so the C can never change. But the 2, I do not make it a $sign because I want it to change. In other words, it can become C3 and it can become C4 and it become C5. And that would mean that this would be the same as making this group number 1, group number 2, group number 3, and group number 4. So when the user clicks and they go to the form, so they're going to click from the sheet and it says join, and then that goes to a form, and that form has a question, and this is already going to say what group do you want to join. It's already going to say number 1 if I clicked in the 2 row. If I clicked in the 3 row, this will become 2. If I clicked in the 4 row, it would become 3, and that will automatically be filled in. What about the other boxes? What do we want them to say? What do we want the other response areas to say? Well, we don't want them to say anything because we want the user to fill that in. What we can do is we can just skip those. Don't write them at all. We can just cut those out. And in fact, if we look back at our original code here for the link, we can see this. Remember when we have the link that says join the group, right? It says join group. The code that's there is this hyperlink. So we're going to link out to the form. And then here is all the code to go to the form. And here we use this default. What's this default? This default is the ID. We put the ID in there. Now, where do we put the ID? Let's look at this for a second. Here's an ID from the form that it gave me on the pre-filled link. And here we can see it's very long. It's hard to remember, right? But let's just look at a little bit of it here. Log E G, capital E, capital, just the end there. So if we just remember that end, and then we come over to our HTML link page, which is here, we can see that we're not using that. We're using default B9, and that's in the default tab on B9. So right here. And what do we see here? Well, we have that ID. I put that ID here. You can see at the end, log, L-O-G, capital E-G. This whole number here, this ID, is the same as the ID for the link. So I went ahead and I took the form identification ID and I pasted it in here. Now, again, why did I do that? Because I don't want to write this very long code every time. It's too confusing, easy to mix up. And maybe in the future, I want to change the form to be a different form. If I wanted to change the form in the future, I don't want to have to change everything on my page. I just come here and change this one piece of information. And how do we get that information? Well, we do it by calling the tab. Remember, this is the tab name. And then you use the exclamation point. And then you say, where is it at? Here it's at B9. So B9. Okay. So that's where we got that from, the ID. All right, now let's go ahead and continue looking at what we did here. So we've got that, and then we've got view form, which is the same as what the form gave us, right? We just copied it. Question mark, exactly the same. USP equals PP URL, it's all exactly the same. And then entry, and then dot. And then here, this number here, 4878311173, is the same as this number here because I copied it. I'm just copying what Google gave me. I'm just copying it right over here. No problem, right? I'm not changing anything, not doing anything special. It's very easy, actually. It's very straightforward. I'm not making a big deal about anything. I'm just copying it. But what am I doing here that is special? Well, you can see what special is right here. We went ahead and we add a quotation mark, right? We add that little quotation mark, and then we go ahead and we add the ampersand, and then we say C2. Why? Because we want to grab group 1. So let me mark that up a little bit. Quotation mark, ampersand, C2, ampersand, quotation mark, because I want the quotation mark to quote here, and this quotation mark quotes here. But this information here, this is not a quotation mark because it's outside the quotation. So this is something that can change. The other things cannot change. They must stay the same. So they're inside quotation marks. And we just follow Google's format. So again, you can ask the AI for an example, and then you can go ahead and change the pieces you need to change. But if there's some code you need to change, it goes outside. There's no quotation marks there, you see? Let me cover that again just very quickly here to make sure you see that. So here's the beginning quotation mark, and then here's an end. And then we have and, ampersand, ampersand. Then here's a beginning quotation mark, and here's an end quotation mark. And here's a beginning quotation mark all the way down to here, the ending quotation mark. You see? So these values here, like C2, are variables. They're going to change. But these other values here are not changing. They're always the same. Okay, now, what did we do that's kind of special here? Well, we took the 1, 1, 1, and we're going to change that to become C2. And remember, C2 is going to be over here on our group links page, and it's going to be C2, group 1. So if you clicked on that link, that's going to automatically be filled by the value in C2, which will be group 1. Okay, what about the next question? Because we have more than one question, right? We've got 4 questions here total. So the first question is, what group do you want to join? The next question is your Chinese name. So what do we do for the Chinese name? Well, the Chinese name, we wrote BBB. So that's going to be right over here, BBB. So this will be Chinese name. And what do we do? Well, we're just going to delete that BBB. So that question number is 1094321350. And you can see that's the same as here. And we have an equal sign. And then after the equal sign, what do we have? Nothing. We just removed it. That's all. We just cut it out. We only cut out the BBB. We didn't cut out anything else. And then the next question, which is this number here, ending in 046, which is here, 046, same number, the same thing. It says equal CCC. We cut the CCC. See, right in here, we cut the CCC. We cut it out. And then the last number here, the last question number is 142, blah, 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 699. And so we come all the way over to here, 699, that's it. And what do we do? Right here, we cut out what? The 444. We cut it out. So we removed it. And that's all we do. Now when we just take the result and copy it back over to our sheet where we want to make the link. And so that's how we get this code here. And what do we want to see in this code? We want to not see all of this. That would be too long. So we hide it. We hide it by using the hyperlink command. So the hyperlink command, we can ask Google, how do you use the hyperlink command? And it shows you. You have the URL, which is the address, and that's this long, complicated string here. But we don't want the user to see that. We want them to see something easy. That will be the link label. And so the link label, we just make it join group. So I use the word join group inside quotation marks because that's what Google requires. You have to use quotation marks. I have a space at the end just to give it a little bit extra space at the end. It will do exactly that. And then I go ahead and at the very end, I add end C2. And what does that do? It says join group C2. And what will C2 be? Well, that'll be 1. Now we can't see it here because we filled it up already. So let's go to the next example here, right here. So this would become C3. So here we have C3. And the next one down would be C4 here, and the next one down would be C5, and so on and so on. They just keep on going. So it says join group space, and then ampersand, $C, meaning the C column, and then the number that you're at, whatever row you're at. So if we're here at the second row, it's going to say C3 because it's number 3. And so that's what the user is going to see. They're going to see join group. In this case, it'll be group 2, right? Group 2. And then we have a comma. Now, why do we have a comma? Because the comma goes back to our if. Remember the if? And so we were testing if. So if this is not true, right, that the C3 is not NA, then you have to do something else. Or if the number is 0 or less, meaning it's not bigger than 0, then that's also going to be a problem. And if the logical test is false, then you need to do this. If the logical test is true, then you need to do all the way to here, right? So we have a function inside of a function kind of thing. Let me draw that for you here. Pretty easy to understand. I know you've done this before in your math classes, but coding does this especially a lot. So it's very good to keep track of, right? So we've got a if something is true, right? And then inside an if, we could have another if, right? Right? So this if could be if we test something, like if, then we do a test. And then we say, if this is true, if this test is true, then do this. So it'd be then this. And if it's not true, we got our commas here, then it would be else. Else this. And then this if is the same thing all over again. It'll say if, and you do a test, and then you have a comma, another comma, and this here would be if it's true, then you do this. And if it's not true or else, then you do this. And you could even have another if inside of here. You could have many ifs inside the ifs. And you could have if inside the else or the not true. Also, you could do ifs inside of there. So you just need to use your Google Helper to keep track of your functions and where your commas are. And then inside there, where their commas are. That's what you need to pay attention to. So it looks a little bit complicated, but actually it's not so complicated. Okay, so if we come back to our page here, and we go ahead and we say, okay, so we've got this group is full. Let me go ahead and change that. So I'm going to go to the data that's been collected, and I'm going to remove one of these and remove one of the next ones also. So actually, we just have one person so far has clicked group 1. So if we come over to our links, now we can see there are 2 empty seats, and I could go ahead and click this to join. So I want to join this group also. Maybe I know somebody who already joined, we're friends or we're classmates, or maybe I don't know anybody. And I go ahead and I click that, and it will take me over to the form. And then the form here will already tell me what group that I clicked. And I just go ahead and fill in the other information. Then I push submit, and it will go into the sheet where the responses. And then this would go down 1 empty seat. And then when it's 3 empty seats, it will change to say no one can click this anymore. Do that one more time. Okay, come back here, and there we go, full. So how do we get the full? Again, right there. We did an if test, remember? And then we say if that ends up being false, do something. If it ends up being true, do something else. So here in this case, it's false, so we say full. Okay, that's a really easy way to get this going. It seems complicated, but it's super powerful once you learn how to do it. Once you get used to it, it's much easier than it seems. In this way, you can use the forms to actually input information that would be hard to collect otherwise. And then you're showing the user things that they normally would not be able to see, right? So you can do things like fill out the forms beforehand, and normally If you're just using a Google Sheet, that would not work so easily.